I think in the last few years, I think it's also cultural with Australian multinationals. You know, the contrast between when you travel here and when you're in China, for example, where everything's expanding, they're growing, they're investing, they're training, they're trying new things, they've got money to spend. And sometimes when you come back to Australia, where the emphasis in the last few years has been on cost control and efficiency and things like that, that can have a dampening impact on innovation. But I also think the definition of innovation, and in fact, it's one of the key questions I ask leaders. I say, what does innovation mean in your organisation? So let's define it. And all the leaders always say, look, we know exactly what it is. And then you go around the room and ask them, and they all get a bit embarrassed because they all have different definitions. So I think one of the, I call it the sort of, you know, 3 key questions of innovation is to say, what is it? You know, and let's not just define it to, you know, big new products and disruption, particularly for Australian multinationals. How do we measure it? So, you know, we have to have some measure of if it's working or not. And the third question for me is some sort of, you know, why, what I call the why innovate story. So what's the short, sharp, compelling, urgent, you know, reason why people should innovate, why people should change, why people should experiment, why people should risk failure, why we try new things. So if leaders can answer those 3 questions and then, you know, communicate that to the rest of the organisation, then they're kind of halfway there. And I think the big opportunity is this idea of, you know, there's a concept in complexity theory that says creativity lives, you know, at the edge of chaos, at the edge of chaos. And I love that idea. It's a kind of lovely way of talking about culture. And if you imagine head office is sort of all order, and you can't have too much randomness, so if you have this sort of edge of chaos, I think that's where multinationals can kind of live. You know, they can try things without everyone in the world head office knowing exactly what they, you know, what they're doing. So they can experiment, they can try things, they can change things, and then, you know, and the big opportunity, if they get it right, is to sort of publicise that throughout the multinational world. And that can be very exciting. You know, a long time ago I used to work with American Express, and I was head of marketing there, and we would try lots of little things, and if it didn't work, no big deal, and in fact no one had to know about it. And if it did work, you know, more people knew about it, and they could learn from it, and then we could share that information around the rest of the world. And in fact, if you think about innovation, if you think about it, it's about generating ideas, and I often ask managers and leaders, you'll say, you know, you've got to generate some ideas, you've got to test it, you've got to measure it, you've got to learn from it and share it. If you think of that as a cycle, what are you good at? And everyone typically will say, we're fantastic at measuring. We just measure everything. But if you step back and go, you know what, we've got to become better at generating big, new, rich ideas, small ones. We've got to be better and faster at testing things. We're great at measuring. But if we measure stuff, we've also got to learn from it. And if we learn from it, we've actually got to be even better at sharing it. So I think that there's this mindset that says it always has to be big and disruptive. It doesn't. Small is beautiful, you know. Out of little things, big things can grow. I think I've heard that somewhere before, but